Dan Watson sitting in today for Jay Zimbauer, as I'm going to be doing on a regular basis about once a month. Jay's doing important things as always, and he'll be back next week. So the ground rules, as I've said each time that I come on, is that I'm not the ASE certified mechanic like Jay. So if you're looking for how to fix the brakes or how to make sure the timing is correct or whatever you're looking for a particular problem, save those questions for Jay. He is the automotive genius. On the other hand, I am a certified lubrication specialist, and I would be delighted to answer your questions associated with engine oil, transmission oil, gear oils, fuel additives, automatic transmission fluid. Hey, we'll even talk about oil for your lawnmower or for your airboat, or I'll stay away from airplanes. That I have to stay away from. That'd get me in trouble, okay? So all you got to do is pick up the phone and give us a call here and ask the question you always wanted to know. Now, my specialty is that I am a distributor of AMSOIL synthetics here in the Central Florida area, and so I would be glad to answer questions on synthetic oils as well as conventional oils and explain the differences and those kind of things, and any question that you might have. The numbers are easy. They're put out here all the time, but it's 407-674-1025 or toll-free 855-545-1025. Now, each time that I'm here, I try to give you a little bit of info on some different things, sort of like I'd call it, school of the shop, talking a little bit about these different kinds of things. When you go to the parts store and you look for oil, you really need to know what you're looking for. I mean, you go and you think, well, as an old commercial used to, people would say, Earl is Earl. Well, no, it's really not. And you need to know which one applies to your vehicle and the application you're going to put it in. The first area I want to talk about today, because I keep every show that I'm on, I say I'm going to get around and talk to it. I'm going to talk a little bit about diesel oil today, because that's a specialty. You can't go down to the big box store and buy a regular automotive oil and put it in your turbocharged Volkswagen diesel, your Mercedes diesel, BMW diesel. Those are European, of course, but there's also Power Stroke diesels, Duramax diesels, Cummins diesels. All these are a variety of diesel engines, and you need to buy the right oil because diesels are very, very specific in what's required, and you need to buy the right stuff. They've now got some incredible, just exhaust systems that are space age, and they have to be protected by running the right type of oil. Well, we've got a question, and that always takes priority, so we're going to go to George. George, what can I do for you?
Good to hear from you. I changed the oil in my car. I use the 030, and within a matter of 2 weeks, sometimes it's black, and it stays that way for a year. I'm just curious if that's normal.
Well, what's happening is that black is an indication of soot level. Now, what type of car are you changing, putting 0W30 in?
2009 Camry.
Okay. Are you satisfied with the car's fuel economy? I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
It seems to be pretty good.
Yeah, it's same as it was when it was new, and it's done that changing the color of oil since it's been new.
Yeah, a lot of times what you have is if the oil is an amber, dark amber, but not black, but dark amber, that can be just a situation of temperature, and the oil will naturally turn over time. But usually when it's turning as quick as you're talking about, it's an indication that it's got quite a bit of carbon depositing in the oil, and that usually comes from no other place than the combustion chamber, and it indicates a lot of times that the engine is running too rich, that you have a richer mixture than you need. And so what's happening is you're getting a bit of an incomplete burn, and it leaves carbon waste, which gets picked up by the oil. It's usually soot, so it's so small that the standard full-flow filter just won't even touch it. It's down in the 1 to 5 micron range, and it just colors the oil kind of like Kool-Aid coloring. And in gasoline engines, it's a little rare. It's quite usual in diesel engines. But in a gasoline engine, I think I would – do you have multi-port fuel injection or a single throttle body fuel injection?
Throttle body.
Okay. You could try it, but it sounds to me like it'd be worth at least trying some type of a cleaner. AMSOIL makes one called Performance Improver that everybody seems to think is exceptionally well.
I do use that, yeah.
Okay.
But see, it's done this since it was new.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. There's something that's making it run. The computer itself is what's controlling what's called the fuel-air mixture. So it's possible that the mass airflow sensor is actually dirty, and that or running on the low end. But what I would do is this is a very good question for Jay when he's back, because what the oil's doing is just picking up a condition that's happening in the engine. Now, you could do an oil sample to see specifically, chemically what's going on with the oil.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that when it turns dark like that, it's an indication of soot. And a gasoline engine, if it's running to the specifications that it shouldn't make much soot at all. I mean, it just doesn't. And so usually when you see that, it's because the fuel-air mixture is not right. The engine is sensing a lower airflow or a higher airflow, one or the other. Jay would be better to talk about that. And what happens is it's metering the fuel in to match the airflow. Now, it could also be have a bad sensor that tells it that it's running very cool when in fact it's not. Mm-hmm. And you remember back, at least when I was a kid, we had chokes on carburetors. And so when it was cold, the choke would be on in order to, choke it down and give you a richer mixture to run in cold weather. Well, if the engine senses that it's not up to temperature, the computer will do the same thing, but it does it by overfeeding fuel to the air mixture, and that ends up being an incomplete burn, and you end up with dark soot levels in the oil.
Well, if you put clean oil in the car, how long should it stay that clean color?
Well, most of the time, there's two things going on. If the car was brand new, there's no soot built up in it anywhere, usually it'll run 6,000-7,000 miles before it starts to get, very dark at all, especially in a Toyota. And now once you've started producing soot in the engine, you have residual tucked around in different places. And so when you put new oil in, it takes it a little while, but it'll clean out some nooks and crannies and bring some of that back in. It's kind of like having a dirty bucket and putting clean water in it. Eventually it'll soak up the stuff and cause the water to look murky. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when Jay gets back, call him and tell him and ask him the question. You can just tell him, say, you talked to me, the oil's dark. I said it must have something to do with the fuel-air mixture, and does he have any ideas or things that need to be tested?
That sounds good.
All right. Hey, it's a good question, though. Very good question. I get that question most of the time with guys with the diesels who go, my God, I changed my oil, it's dark. And I go, well, what'd you expect? So good call, George. All right. So that does lead us right up to our first break. And, hey, that's good. So you guys call in here and make this go by real fast for me. I'd just love to answer your questions. So we're going to take a break, pay some bills, and be right back. And welcome back to Car Time Radio. Dan Watson sitting in today for Jay Zimbauer. He'll be back next week and answer all of your heavy-duty automotive questions. I am a certified lubrication specialist, and I would entertain questions on engine oil, transmission oil, gear lubes, grease, filtration, fuel additives, radiator coolant, those kinds of things. Now, I had a question that was presented to me about how do you calculate the time to change oil in things that don't have speedometers? In other words, you have a lawnmower, for example, or maybe you have one of the small all-terrain vehicles and utility vehicle, and you don't really have a speedometer that's keeping up with an odometer, and how often should you change oil? Well, here's the first thing. You should always look in the owner's manual first and see what it says, because they give you a specification. But there is a rule of thumb of 35 miles per hour and 40 miles per hour in some cases. Some use one, some use the other. So if I was going to go the 3,000-mile range, we'll just make it easy. I would say 3,500 miles is 100 hours, okay? Now, how do you know when you've been 100 hours if you don't have an hour meter on your lawnmower? Well, you don't. So what you end up doing is you use some calculation, the old ballpark type thing. I mow the lawn for 2 hours per week. It will take 52 weeks to be 104 hours. Now, you can't use that rule of thumb on most lawnmowers because they don't have a filter and they only have a quart of oil. It's not like your car. So in general, for that type of small equipment, you could take that rule of thumb and cut it in half and say that 50 hours would be sufficient. Okay, so about twice a year on the old lawnmower with that has the splash lubrication and no filter. Now, if you got a big riding lawnmower, a nice tractor, John Deere, one of these kind of things, they'll go 100 hours between oil changes with AMS oil. They go about 50 with petroleum. And a lot of those do have hour meters on them. So, it depends upon how sophisticated you get. So there's always a recommendation for everything. You just have to look far enough to find it. So give me a call here at 407-674-1025 or 855-545-1025 and ask me a question, lubrication, filtration, those kind of things. Now, I said I wanted to talk a little about diesels because I've been on the radio maybe 5 times and I never got to it. I was always run out of time talking about gasoline engines. Diesel engines are different animals than gasoline engines. They're both internal combustion engines, but diesel engines use compression ignition, meaning there is no spark plug, and they run at much higher compression, anywhere from 18 to 1 to 25 to 1, where our gasoline engines today are running anywhere from 7.5 to 9 to 1 in compression. When you have that much higher compression, you create much higher cylinder temperatures in the combustion process. The torque and horsepower ratings of diesel engines are lean towards high torque, reasonable horsepower, but very high torque engines. And they're used for heavy-duty commercial applications most of the time. But today, the diesel engines are really beginning to come into vogue here in the United States. They are very high in Europe. 60% of all the automobiles on the road in Europe are diesel. There's a reason for that. Diesel engines achieve let's just say 25 for ease, 25 to 40% better fuel economy than a comparable gasoline engine. So when you live in countries like Great Britain, France, and Germany, where diesel is $8 a gallon and gasoline is $6 a gallon, you're trying to get the most out of whatever you're running for the most efficient mileage and operation you can, because operating a car is expensive in Europe. Now, some of the European models that we have here, Volkswagen, the Volkswagen Tdi, that's an exceptionally popular small car with a turbo diesel that in many cases they're rated at about 45, maybe a little more or less miles per gallon. But everybody that owns them talks about the last time they were on the road and they got 56 miles per gallon, 58 miles per gallon, 52 miles per gallon. I mean, so they outperform their rated fuel economy all the time. Mercedes, they are bringing diesels back into the country now, significant numbers. BMW advertises in their advertising for clean diesel operation. American cars, Ford has the Power Stroke diesel. Chevy, GMC has the Duramax diesel. Cummins comes in the Ram or Dodge trucks. And now we see smaller versions of most all of these coming out. There is a Toyota diesel, a Honda diesel. There's a new 5-cylinder diesel available for ProMaster vans from Dodge. Ford is coming out with a small V6 turbo diesel. It just goes on. And the reason is when you try to achieve these newer fuel standards, mileage standards being set by the federal government that will be gradually coming in over time, you're going to see a lot more diesels. In fact, Toyota is advertising that they have a diesel hybrid in a Camry-sized car that gets 100 miles per gallon. So it's coming in a big way because these guys, the market blazes the path. You look at the market and people want something that really gets this onerous fuel cost off their back, and guess what? The technology steps up and produces it. I knew that it was only time until a diesel hybrid would be on the road, because that puts two things together: the best possible diesel economy with a boost from a battery system that allows it to even go to higher, greater lengths. So be on the lookout for those things. But my interest is to tell you that when you have a diesel, you have to buy different oils for that diesel than you would for your gasoline engine. And it's important for you to do a little homework. You can certainly look at your owner's manual for that vehicle, and it'll tell you to run a diesel engine oil, usually that's going to meet one of these specs like we talked in gasoline, but it is an API classification of CJ4. And you have to run that level of oil. That oil is particularly tailored and modified in order to function in that high-performance turbo diesel and protect the exhaust system from being poisoned by carryover from the engine. I know that these exhaust systems are exotic, and most people don't understand them, but I guarantee you one thing: you'll learn very quickly how expensive they are if you get one screwed up. They cost several $1,000s to replace an exhaust system on these new cars, especially on a Mercedes or a BMW. So you've got to buy the right oil. And when we come back from the break, I'll talk a little bit about European auto oil since I opened that door. And so take down the numbers, 407-674-1025 or toll-free 855-545-1025, and give me a call. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back right after these messages. And welcome back to Car Time Radio. Dan Watson sitting in for Jay Zimbauer today, taking your calls about oil and lubrication. I'm going to go right to the phones and talk to Jeff. Jeff, what can I do for you?
Hey, love listening to the show. I like it when you sit in. You're doing a great job. But a minute ago, you were speaking about turbos, and it prompted, ding, light went on. I need to call you. Got a pre-86 small block Chevrolet. I've already converted it to hydraulic roller cam, so some of my lubrication concerns are resolved there as opposed to flat tap it. But I'm seriously considering adding dual turbochargers. So with that thrown in the mix, and being that it's an aftermarket, I was considering running a Rotella type of oil. Am I on the right track there? What's your take on that?
Well, obviously the Rotella would be satisfactory for turbo use because it's being run in turbo diesel, so that's a good place to start. Now, here's the thing you're looking for with turbos. Very high speed. Turbos run in the thousands of RPMs. And as you know, one side is on the exhaust and being just turned by the exhaust, and the other side is collecting intake air and pressing it up and jamming it into the engine. Now, we got two things going on with turbos. One, we really need an oil that can handle high heat. And so anytime you're in the turbo business, I highly recommend using what we call original chemical-based synthetic, which means it's got a PAO or ester base in it. and that would be AMSOIL, Mobil Platinum, or Redline. One of those three come to my mind right off the bat. Now, nothing wrong with the other oils, but in their synthetics, they're using some a type of base stock which is not got the temperature capability of a PAO or ester base stock. So here's the thing. You look for an oil that has exceptional temperature range and control, and you don't want it to be too thick, so probably about 40 weight is as high as you would go because you want it to pump through that turbo lubrication quickly. Don't stay in there too long. Gets too hot. Can exceed 600 degrees. And you want an oil that then can also lubricate the rest of the engine and have all of the characteristics you need to also protect that as well as the turbos. So I would like to look more at what you've done to this engine to get down on whether I think you should use a 30 or a 40 weight in it. So maybe you should send me an email about this, and I'll just give it to you real quick. It's my name, Dan Watson, and it's at thelubepage.com.
At the Lube what?
Lube Page, P-A-G-E.
Lubepage.com.
Right. And because I'd like to get a little more information, and since you're modifying this thing, and be able to give you a really qualified recommendation without just trying to shoot in the dark from the radio, because you're going to make a nice engine there with an awful lot of power, and we should make sure it gets the very best.
It does have a high volume oil pump in it.
Yeah.
A remote oil filter and a remote oil cooler that has a powered electric fan.
Right. Yeah, you're doing all the right things. I just want to make sure I know which oils I would recommend to you. They're very high. What we're looking for is an oil that has a very good high temperature, high shear rating, but we also want to make sure, depending upon the circumstances and the type of roller that you put in, we may be wanting to use a 30-weight oil, but we also want to use a 30-weight oil that's got extremely good high temperature, high shear ratings. We got a whole bunch of different ones, so I'd like to make that recommendation to you very specifically.
Excellent, Dan. I'm driving. Would you mind giving me that email address one more time?
Yeah, it's Dan Watson, W-A-T-S-O-N, Dan Watson, and it's thelubepage.com.
Got it.
Okay, so let me let you go, and I'll get you on email because that's a more sophisticated question, and let me pick up this other guy here before I run out of this segment.
Love it. Thank you, sir.
All right, we'll do it. All right, we're going to Frank now. Frank, what can I do for you, sir?
I had a question about your local parts house branded oil.
Okay.
In their cheap bottles.
Okay.
In the fine print, it's made by a name brand that I trust. What do you think of those?
A lot of times those are underrated. Like if you go to Napa or one of these auto parts stores and they've got their house brand like Napa Oil or I don't know if CarQuest has one. I haven't looked, but I think O'Reilly has one. Anyway, usually when they put on there who the manufacturer is for you, that's because they're wanting to let you know that they've not gone out and got oil out of Mexico or something and tried to stick it in a bottle and sell it to you. They've got to stand behind that stuff and have a pretty good reputation, because otherwise they lose their name and their reputation. So when you're just talking about petroleum-based oils, I think that I would rather buy one that had a parts house name on it than one that had a big box store name on it.
They also have it in the synthetics also, which is what I've been using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the synthetics that you get a lot of times that are made for the house oil and so forth, they are what we call the bottom tier. They're still rated as synthetic, and you can't say they're not, but it's sort of like when you go out and buy a radial tire, and you can buy a 40,000-mile radial, or you can buy an 80,000-mile radial, or you can buy a 100,000-mile radial with all kind of different ratings. Synthetic oils can be made from basically waving the wand over it and calling it synthetic all the way up to a very high-performance product. So you're doing the right thing, I think, to buy synthetic. I think there's very few times that I wouldn't say that any synthetic is better than any petroleum. Now, as long as you're getting something that's synthetic. And if you're buying it and it's got a Napa name or a parts store name on it, it's going to be synthetic. I'm not going to question that. It's just going to be that you get it at that really low price because they've spec'd it out not to be a high-performance synthetic, but to be the 40,000-mile radial rather than the 80,000. So if you change that oil at regular intervals, every 3,000 or 4,000 miles, maybe 5 at the outside.
I've been doing 5, but I do all highway miles.
Oh, yeah, that's easy on the car. You're doing that oil at 5,000-mile changes, you probably wear your car out somewhere around 1 million miles. Have to get another one because you get tired of
it. I won't on this one because it's kind of grandfathered in.
Yeah, so, no, it's a matter, like I said, when a person buys a 40,000-mile radial, if they run that tire and change it every 35,000 miles, they're going to get great service. If they buy an 80,000-mile radial and pay for it, and it does its job and goes out for 75,000 miles, then they got their money's worth. So it depends upon what you're trying to achieve and what you want. You do have to be careful of some no-name stuff. So you did the right thing to check the manufacturer because there are some companies that are being kicked out of several different states for just making oil that doesn't meet anybody's spec and putting it in bottles and making it look nice and ripping off the consumer. So you do have to do at least that much.
Making it look like somebody else's that it ain't.
Yeah, so... All right, that's a good question,
okay.
Frank. So thanks for the call. And
let me ask you one more question.
All right, go right ahead.
Hook here. I know how you feel on transmission fluid going synthetic. What do you think about the rear end?
Let me put it this way, and it'll probably answer the question. Every time you see one of those brown trucks running that belong to UPS, every single one in the fleet across the world has synthetic gear lube in the rear end. Every time you see one of the several of the different companies with the long-haul trucks, name one, Werner, anybody else, all the gears are synthetic. If there's one place that all of the fleet supervisors are in complete agreement, it's in synthetic in the gears. Now, some of them will go back and forth on transmissions and motors, automatic transmissions and the engine, but when it comes to the gears, either manual transmission or differentials, what they call power units in the bigger trucks, they all agree that synthetics are just hand over fist the best application. There's no comparison.
Enough said.
All right, so.
Hey, Dan, I appreciate the info.
All right, good call, and you can call me in here, folks, at 407-674-1025 or toll free 855-545-1025. We're headed for a break, pay some bills, and be back in a minute. Welcome back to Car Time Radio. Got a bit of a short segment here, but I do have time to take one more call. If you got a question out there, 407-674-1025 or toll free 855-545-1025. Now, I've been trying to get to say a little bit about this diesel oil, and I'm not going to have time to get into depth on that, but just remember, when you own one of these wonderful turbocharged high-performance diesels that are available today, you need to buy high-performance diesel oil properly rated for that engine, okay? And also, European autos, you've got to buy oil that's rated for your car. There's a whole different organization. We have the American Petroleum Institute. In Europe, they have the ACEA, and they make the specifications, and it's not always as simple that our API-rated oil will meet that European spec. So you've got to do due diligence and make sure in your European auto that you use a high-quality European oil. All right, now, not that it's European. It can be American-made. It just has to meet the specs. All right, let me go right to Roger in Oviedo. What can I do for you, Roger?
Hey, Dan. I'd like to use your example of a 100,000-mile radial tire. If I rate M's Oil Series 2000 as a 100,000-mile radial, where would you rate Mobil 1?
Mobil 1 Platinum now. That's they have two groups. They have regular Mobil 1 and they have Mobil 1 Platinum Series. That would be an 80,000-mile radial.
Okay, and the regular Mobil one?
60,000.
Okay, all right. But if you can't get AMSOIL, Mobil Platinum's probably the best?
Well, yeah, I think so. It's a very, very well constructed oil. It lacks just a couple things that's in the AMSOIL formula, and yeah, I would go with that. Now, there are other oils out there that would be 40 or 50,000 mile radials because they're using a different base stock. AMSOIL has a series of XL oil that uses that different base stock, and it would be a 40 or 50,000 mile radial. And then there are some out there that would be glorified bias ply tires, just wearing a label that says that they're a radial, and you need to stay away from those.
Right. And what about Royal Purple?
Well, Royal Purple has they have some exceptional racing oils, okay? Mm-hmm. And when they package for the consumer, it's not the same oil. So I just tell customers to be sure when you look at those oils that you make sure you know what you're buying. They do a lot of advertisement of things, and it's their racing oils, high-performance oils. But if you go to a store and buy their consumer-based oil, it will not be the same. So just be careful and know that you're not actually getting what many times is advertised.
Right. Okay, you answered my questions. I appreciate it.
All right, those are good questions. And, folks, I'm just about out of time, but I want to tell you a couple things here. I mentioned ACEA. That is the European organization which controls, like our American Petroleum Institute. It's a French thing, and it stands for Association of Constructioners. They have French would be different. They'd say that different, but Constructioners of European Autos, okay? And there are 5 levels, not one, but 5 levels of oil certification that can be achieved in the European market. And if you own a European car, your manufacturer will have a specification. For Volkswagens, their VWs, they have the 501 and the 505 and the 507 and the 501.01, and they have a whole bunch. Well, you have to look in your owner's manual and make sure that you have oil going into your Volkswagen, especially the turbo diesels, that meets those specs. They're very, very specific, and you've got to make sure you buy the right oil. If you have a BMW, same thing. They have their own oil specification that matches up to the European specification, and if it's not available on the oil that you're buying, don't use it. You might ask, why is it so crazy and so specific? Well, I'll tell you one thing. If you have a warranty on the vehicle, it's very crazy and very specific because they'll void it in a minute if you're not using the right oil. So to protect yourself in these very nice vehicles, stick with the plan. Use the appropriate oil that they specify. Now, as I told you before, I work with AMSOIL. AMSOIL has taken on this project, and they have a series of European auto oil. Now, we're not the only ones. Mobil has a new European auto oil. Some other guys do. But they worked hard to try to make sure they get each and all of these specifications so that they can say to you, you got that Mercedes, here's the exact correct oil that goes in it, and they list that Mercedes number on the bottle and on the tech sheet. So if you're driving European autos, pay attention. The American idea of one oil fits all gets nowhere in the European market. They just don't go down that road. So that would be Volvos, Peugeots, BMWs, Citroens, if you find one of those, Mercedes, Volkswagen, Audis, Porsches, all of them. And so you have to get the right oil, do a little time, make sure you get it. About 2/3 of those cars now are all turbocharged, either gas or diesel. So now you've got a second thing thrown in to have a turbo-rated oil. Those are not cheap. They're not going to be cheap. The car wasn't cheap. You can't buy, it's like you buy a brand new Porsche and you go out and try to put a set of, Firestone trailer tires on it. That's not going to work, okay? You have to go out and put a set of high-performance radios on it. Well, you also have to treat the engine to the high-performance engine oil that will satisfy the turbo and the sophisticated systems that are in that vehicle. So all I'm trying to make sure that you understand is that old saying, Earl is Earl, is just nonsense. You have to pay attention. All of these cars, I don't care if you own a Toyota or a Porsche or a Chevy, they're all now. All of GM uses a system called Dexos-rated oils, and if it's not Dexos-rated oil, it voids the warranty. So pay attention to this stuff. Go to my website. It is thelubepage.com, or you can go to lubedepot.com. Either one of those, and you can contact me there. I've written articles on oil. I have about 70 YouTube videos about oil. You can find out the information if you have an interest. And I must tell you that you're the one that really has to pay attention for your car. I can't tell you how many horror stories I get from people where they went somewhere and somebody put oil in that wasn't satisfactory for their application, and now they're really worried about it. Hey, listen, they got it out quick enough, nothing happened. But you run the wrong oil in one of these turbo diesels, you may wipe it out before you get to the next oil change. And I can tell you how much those things cost, like about $14,000 for a replacement engine. So it's real serious business. Hey, it's been good. I'll probably be back in about a month. So until then, be safe and